The more questions you ask, the more information you get, the better information you get, the better decisions you get to make. And that's really, in a nutshell, for me, what it's all about. Is it relates to what I went through with mom and dad, is what people go through in the personal finance realm as they're trying to plan for their family and their future. Don't stop asking questions.
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Robert Gignac wants you to know that you are capable of creating the financial future you desire. But you can't create a financial future if you don't know anything about your financial present. 17 years ago, Robert lost his job in IT and realized he was actually doing okay financially. Sure, the money he had accumulated wouldn't last forever, but as long as he generated some income to fill in the gaps along the way, he would be fine. Robert only knew this because he had a financial plan in place. If you're laid off and don't have a financial plan, the only thing you can do is wonder if you're going to be okay. You might get stressed out looking for a new job and panic if you don't find one right away. With a long-term financial plan, you don't have to wonder. You'll know if you're okay or not. But this personal finance stuff is really dull, so Robert decided to write a book called Rich is a State of Mind to try to convince Canadians that taking control of your money is easier than they might think. A highly sought-after speaker, Robert delivers dynamic keynote speeches and interactive workshop programs to international organizations, financial industry conferences, and private clients. He also has a podcast called Money, Motivation, and More, and a TV show called We Talk Money. Robert joined me in the studio to tell his personal finance story.
I think one of the earliest memories of money that I've got, Bo, was when I was about 13 to 14 years old. And I had my first job. I got a job working at a lumber yard in town, and I got my first paycheck.
What town was this?
This was in LaSalle, Ontario, just outside of Windsor.
Nice. That's where my wife is from, Well River Canard.
There you go.
So,
I know it well. I grew up down the street. She probably went to the same high school I did if she went to Sandwich Secondary.
No, she didn't go to Sandwich. She went to Villanova.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just a little further down
the street. Further down the street.
Yeah. Awesome.
And one of the things that I realized, it was kind of the first time I had my own money, that wasn't an allowance, that didn't come from mom and dad. And I wasn't really sure what to do with it. I went to the bank, I cashed the check, and, you had to do it with banker's hours then. You had to go by 3 p.m. There were no ATMs. And so I went in on a Friday when they were open late till 5, cashed the check, and I had like $70. And it was like,
you had no clue?
I am like, what do I do with this? I have lots of things I want to buy.
Sure.
But I'm sure that probably isn't the best thing to do with it. And so I kind of took it home, showed mom and dad. It's like, look, first paycheck. Mm-hmm. And they went, great. So how much of it are you putting away?
Okay, so they did start that conversation with you.
And I'm like, put it away for what? Like till next week or till no? And they started to explain to me the concept that when you get money, some of it goes away for a longer term. Some of it goes away for a shorter term. And then some of it you get to spend because, of course, I was 14 years old. I didn't have any obligations, right?
No.
Not the way we do as adults, right? You've got mortgage and car payments and hydro and, all those things that need to get paid that come right off the top.
And you're so far away from thinking about it. Did it make an impact on you when they said that at the time, do you think?
It probably didn't right away. This is more of a retrospective thing.
Sure.
But I then set up a savings account and made regular contributions to it when I was a kid. And of course, then as I got to be an older teen, when you're younger, your parents' influence is different. Mm-hmm. And then you get to be 17, 18, 19, and that's like, yeah, that's not working for me. I'm spending every dime I got.
I got my own ideas.
I've got my own ideas about money now, but I'd never really forgotten about the fact that there was this bank account here that had some money in it. And okay, I'm not going to touch it. At some point, I'll do something with it. And then eventually you learn to, I guess, in some ways, ignore your parents' advice. You create your own ideas, and then you get into your late 20s and early 30s and go like, holy crap. Mom and Dad were actually right.
I should have listened more.
I wish I had listened
happens.
more. And sometimes you see this in the work that I do where I'm talking to people about personal finances and money, and they go, I wish I knew that when I was 25.
Yeah.
And the reality is, we all knew it when we were 25. We just didn't do anything with it when we were 25.
We know all this stuff.
Because we just got overwhelmed by everything that was going on around us. And because of that, we didn't apply the things that we knew at the time. If we had, it would have been great. But the reality is we didn't. So when do you get back into that rhythm? But one of the things for me, outside of that initial first paycheck experience, was I was 20 years old. I was living up in Ottawa, Ontario. I graduated from St. Clair College in Windsor. I'm on my own for the first time, living far away from Mom and Dad. You know, they're in LaSalle. I'm in Ottawa. Was making pretty good money working for the federal government at StatsCan. And the Canadian Softball Fastball Championships were in Ottawa. Teams from all over Canada. I pitched fastball when I was a kid. Loved the game. And went to the park to see the game. And came to the realization that I didn't have the $7.50 to get me into the park.
Really? Like in your bank account or on
I didn't have it. I didn't have it on me.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I probably didn't have it in the bank either. Because, you know, I was 20 years old. I was making pretty good money at the time. This is 1981.
Yeah.
And, you know, probably making about 18 to 19,000 a year.
Okay.
When I was 20, because IT had just started to blossom into the technology industry.
Early days, yeah.
Didn't have any student debt. Didn't own a car. And still had no disposable income because probably for a variety of reasons. I was paying rent and, taking the bus and bus passes and probably living a little bit beyond my means at 20 going like, hey, I've figured this all out.
Yeah. And
couldn't go see the thing I really wanted to see.
Interesting. And
it was kind of like a little flip went click. And it was like, you got to figure this out.
And maybe I'm not managing things as well as I
exactly.
I could be.
And some of that, I don't know if there was this thing going on, the little movie projector in the back of your head of Mom and Dad going, when you get paid, you put some of this money away. Mm-hmm. And I would like to say that was the trigger point, Bo. But I'm not even sure that was it.
But that was just an early memory of
because it was only about 2 years later.
Okay.
For about 6 months, and I share this with audiences all the time. I said, I did a really stupid thing for about 6 months where I paid off my Visa with my MasterCard. Because I still hadn't figured it out. And I was kind of like magically going like, I wonder if the bank's ever going to figure this out. And we're not talking massive amounts, a couple $100. I really wasn't spending all that much money, but didn't have the money to pay off the bill. So wait, I'll take cash advance and pay off this bill with that bill.
Now, I'm assuming at the time cash advance interest was instantaneous as it is today?
Pretty much instantaneous as it was today. It wasn't quite as onerous as it is today, but it was still enough that by the end of the 6 months, I had said this to a buddy of mine. It's like, this is really cool. And he went, you're an idiot. And I'm like,
I didn't want to say it.
I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, no, you're an idiot. And he sat me down and said, okay, this is how this works.
Interesting.
And you're building what you think is a good system for managing your money. You are building a downward spiral that is going to explode.
That's right.
If you don't get this figured out. And I got it figured out.
So before then, you weren't even thinking about credit card interest at all.
I really wasn't. I was thinking about the fact that I solved this immediate problem by using this card. And then the next month when that bill came in, it's like, well, I didn't put anything on this card, so I'll just bounce it back over to here. Never thinking that in that long-term picture. And you have to keep in mind that back when I went to high school and went to college, which was the late 70s, early 80s, nobody talked about personal finance in school.
Sure.
They didn't talk about compound interest in both the positive or the negative sense in terms of credit and debt versus saving and investing. They didn't teach you how to manage your money. They, graduated from college. They hand you your diploma. I had a job already lined up before I graduated. Moved to Ottawa, and away you went.
Did they come to St. Clair to recruit you?
They did.
Yeah.
And, which rarely happens now.
Yeah.
Now students are kind of on their own. They showed up at the school and said, these are the jobs we've got open. And I have to admit, Bo, I lucked out because the gentleman who came to interview us at St. Clair had graduated from St. Clair 5 years earlier.
Okay.
And was now in a position with StatsCan that he came back to do some recruiting. And he put us all in a room, and our graduating class in 1981 was only 27 students. So we were on the cusp of what became IT. When I did it, it was called data processing. Gives you an idea of how old I am.
That was your program?
That was the program. It was called data processing.
Sounds perfect for government.
Perfect, because they have lots of data, and they need to do something with it, particularly StatsCan.
Yeah. And,
of course, in 1981... it was census year.
Okay.
And he said, we've got all kinds of positions open. We need people who can write code to process the census data. He said, I'm not going to give you a hard sell. He said, here's the deal. He said, I can hire one of you. I can hire 10 of you. I can hire all of you. Come back here tomorrow and tell me who wants to move to Ottawa in May.
Wow.
And 20 of us did.
Okay, all 20 of you.
And so 20 of us moved to Ottawa, and it was kind of like having a little frat party in Ottawa because we all lived within walking distance of each other. None of us had cars, and we all commuted to StatsCan every day at a place called Tunney's Pasture, which is where the StatsCan buildings were. And for the first couple of years, it was an extension of college that we were getting paid for.
Yeah, it just sounds like that. You didn't really get your independence yet.
No. And it was kind of cool. And then eventually, people partnered up and moved off and moved to other parts of the government and moved to different parts of Ottawa. But it was really a cool experience.
So you go through this credit card cycle or loop, let's call it an infinite loop.
Infinite downward spiral.
Infinite downward spiral. And then what did you do? Was that a bit of a wake up then?
It was. It absolutely was. And then I started to, I'll say, get my crap together for the audience.
Please say whatever you like. It's all good.
And so what happened after that was I had done the computer thing for about 4 years at this point. Okay. And went, this kind of sucks.
The data processing part.
I liked it. I was writing code in languages no IT person today has ever heard of, things like Pascal and PL1 and Fortran and assembler.
Yeah, nice.
And I was really good at it, I think. And I went, but I want to get in the management side.
Okay.
So I decided to go back to school.
Okay.
I wasn't interested in university after high school because I thought it was too theoretical. I wanted to learn how to do stuff. Well, college taught me how to do stuff. And then after 4 years of doing stuff, I realized a little more theory probably wouldn't hurt.
Interesting perspective, because I always wonder if a 4-year bachelor degree at university being very theoretical is a waste of time when you should be finding something practical first. So I think
it depends on the program, really,
Sure,
Bo,
okay.
because now so many universities have co-op programs where you can kind of mix and match, and you're learning, then you're working, then you're learning, then you're working, which I think is awesome. But that really wasn't a big thing back in the early 80s. So I decided to go back to school, applied to Wilfrid Laurier and went because they had a good business program. And so left Ottawa, went to Waterloo, did a full year there, and then had an interesting meeting with the dean of the business program who said, Robert, we really like having you here, but we can't let you continue in the program because you can't pass calculus.
Oh, no.
And
it's hard. I remember first year calculus,
Well, and for me, what happened was back in the day, and some of your younger listeners probably won't realize, there used to be a thing called grade 13.
OAC for me.
OAC, right?
Grade 13 turned into OAC, which turned into whatever
Which turned
it is
into
now.
nothing because I got rid of it and de-streamed everybody. But because I didn't go to what was then called grade 13, I never took grade 13 math, which included calculus, functions and relations, algebra.
For me, it was a separate class. Calculus was separate from algebra. So they realized at that point that was needed to pass these first year university courses.
Exactly. So I never took that. And then I went to college where they really didn't care about the math because it was all about the programming. I went and worked for 4 years, and now I'm back sitting in a university level class, never having taken the highest end high school math. So I was lost.
So that's it. So that was the main reason why you couldn't?
And as I said to the dean, I said, I've got an A in every class I took, including algebra.
Sure.
Because to me, algebra was like programming.
Okay,
it was formulas.
Sure.
I get that. But calculus, it's a different beast all its own.
I don't remember any of it.
And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And they said, no calculus, you don't get to go on.
Well, that sucks because, you've lived the rest of your life since then now. Have you used calculus a lot?
I have not. I do, and I'll admit, I understand the concept that teaching people to think is a good thing, even if what you're teaching them is very abstract. And it's kind of like people who can do Sudoku puzzles. I know people who are very proficient at math who struggle with Sudoku because they can't do pattern matching of numbers in squares, right? I could never do calculus. I'm pretty good at Sudoku because I can recognize patterns in kind of the way my thought processes work. It's like over, down, divide. Look at this. What's the pattern that's missing here?
Yeah.
So at that point, when they said I couldn't stay in the business program, I said, I do want to stay here. I like the school. So what about an MBA? Because I had 4 years of work, 2 years, 3 years of college, and a year here where I did pretty well in, with the exception of one class. First question they asked me was, what's your undergrad in? I'm like, don't have an undergrad, but I got all this other stuff.
This was going to be my undergrad.
And they said, no undergrad, no MBA. Oh. Now, of course, we're 1984 time.
These rules.
Right?
I hate all these rules.
Yeah, very rules driven. And I said, wait. I said, let me get this right. Somebody who graduates from here with a BA in, I don't know, psychology, on a good day, they might not be able to spell business administration, gets in because they've got an undergrad, no work experience.
Oh, boy.
They get in, and I can't get in. And they went, yeah, that's kind of how it works. So I went down, changed my major from honors business admin to BA psych. And
that's what you did.
That's what I did. And about a semester into it, I said to myself, I can't do this full time. Okay. I've got to go back to work.
Yeah.
So I went back to work. And what did I go back to do? The thing I knew how to do.
Yeah.
I went back to writing code.
What was making you want to go back? Like just you were restless?
I just spending the money to do it full time. I loved the courses and liked the program, but there was this nagging thing that's like, you got to go make some money.
Well, how were you paying for it? Did you have to borrow the money?
I at the time I had borrowed some money, and at the time I had figured out in the previous 4 years how to save some.
You did, okay.
So I was kind of self-funding it, and university in 84 was not the cost of university today.
Okay.
But I decided I wanted to go back to work. And so I went back to work, found an employer who said, you've got the exact skill set we're looking for. And then I got hung up between the information technology team and the HR department.
Okay.
Which, if you've ever had one of those arguments, it can be really kind of esoteric. HR said, we're glad that they love you, but we only hire people with degrees.
Oh, this is really frustrating.
And I went, but I'm working on my degree.
Yeah.
And they went, oh. And I said, I'm currently enrolled, Wilfrid Laurier.
Yeah.
And I said, I will continue to do so. That's my plan. Oh, well, if you're working on your degree, we'll pay for it.
What?
And I'm like, I say exactly what? And they said, yes.
Okay.
And so I went and had another meeting with the IT team, and I said, is this true? And they said, yes. I said, great. So
everyone's good.
Everybody's happy. I start working. I'm taking night classes, 2 classes every semester from 85 to 88, so I could actually graduate.
Wow.
I submit my first expense claim.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I get a call from HR. We'd like to talk to you. So I go down. What's up? We'd like to talk to you about these classes you're taking. You're taking developmental psychology. You're taking sociology of suicide.
Oh, no.
You're taking team group dynamics behavior. And they said, so are you like front loading your IT degree with electives?
Oh, no.
And I went, oh, I'm not doing an IT degree. I'm doing a degree in psychology.
Oh, boy.
And they went, what? I said, yeah.
Yeah.
He said, well, we just assumed. I said, you never asked.
Yeah, there was no conversation about that.
I said, so we've got a problem.
Ooh.
And they said, no, we don't have a problem. You've got a problem.
Yeah, you're already working
and so
there.
I went up and I talked to my boss and I said, here's the deal, Jerry. I said, and so he said, let's go. Off we go to HR.
Okay.
And my boss looked at him, and bless his soul, he looked at me and he said, you weren't smart enough to ask him what he was taking? He said, I knew. He said it was part of our conversation.
Yeah,
he knew.
You would have mentioned it.
And he didn't care because he didn't, as many people believe sometimes, that, yeah, you've got a degree, but I want you to write code and do really cool stuff with our computer systems. Whether or not you've got a degree is kind of irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
If HR is making it mandatory and you're pursuing a degree and they were not smart enough to ask you if it was psychology or IT.
Yeah, it's really just a formality.
And so what he said, he said, you never asked. He said, I've got signed paperwork where you agreed to fund his degree at Wilfrid Laurier.
That's right.
As long as he, continued to pursue it, didn't take semesters off, submitted his stuff.
All the conditions.
He said, he's met every condition of the employment agreement. He said, I've got some bad news for you, HR. You're on the hook for a psych degree.
Okay.
And I did the next 3 years doing this and graduated in 88 with a psych degree, BA Psych, which at the time I thought it would enable me to go back and do the MBA. It finally met the undergrad thing. It never, ever happened, Bo. I never went back, never did the MBA.
Because you didn't want to?
I was at a different point. I had fallen back in love with the IT thing.
Okay.
And the thought at this point, was in a relationship. And it's like, no, I busted my butt for 3 years, 2 courses every semester, spring, summer, fall, and winter. It's like, no, I'm not going back to school right now.
Yeah.
And as in the long run, as it proved out, never ever did go back.
Would you recommend someone works and go to school at night? Would you ever, if someone was considering this?
I would. It takes an incredible amount of discipline. And you have to, if you're doing it, I guess, as a single,
sure,
then everything falls on you.
Yeah.
If you're doing it when you're partnered with somebody, it takes a great deal of support from the partner.
Yeah.
Because, it sounds simple to say, well, I'm working 45, 50 hours a week, and I'm going to class, and I'm doing my studying, and I'm writing exams.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
No time. You have no time for anything else.
And for those, and I know those who've done it, not only while being partnered, but with children, it's an even bigger obligation, and more power to them. I'm always in awe of people who do that kind of thing. I don't regret it. Would I do it again? Would I consider going back and doing my MBA today? No, not because I don't think it'd be worthwhile, but it's really just not in the cards for me at this point.
Mm-hmm. And so school's being paid for. You're getting decent money at this job.
I was making pretty decent money at the time.
So is saving
owned a first house.
Okay, so you were able to.
So and I say owned. Okay, the bank owned it, but I was living there with my partner. We came up with a down payment, and it was somebody that I'd met at Laurier. So things were good.
Okay. So property in Waterloo.
Aurora, Ontario, of all places,
okay. Yeah.
Because the job was in Brampton.
Oh, I see.
And I think we did what many people at the time would do when they're trying to figure out, even today, where do you want to live?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here's a pin on the map where I work. Here's a pin on the map where you work.
People do this. Yeah.
What is the maximum amount of commute time we're willing to do? And so you draw that circle around your pin, and you draw that circle around their pin, and like a Venn diagram, you go, we got to live somewhere in this little overlap.
And if there's no town there, you make one.
And the overlap was Aurora, Ontario. So that's how we ended up in Aurora. It was good. Both working, both busy. Sports for me, playing hockey, playing baseball.
So did years just go by? Now you're just full time at the job.
Now full time at the job.
No work, no school anymore.
No school anymore. And a chance meeting at a wedding with a financial advisor, I'll admit, changed the, I don't want to say changed the course of destiny, but it changed what my view on things and what eventually happened in terms of my own personal career.
So up to this point, what are you doing with your money? Just in the bank savings account?
Savings account. Had an RSP
okay.
because back in the day, every bank known to mankind in January and February, it's RSP season.
And a GIC?
Some of it was GIC. Some of it was in the early days of quote unquote mutual funds.
So early mutual funds.
So little bit of investing,
sure.
But mentally, and this was kind of reinforced by my parents and her parents, it's work on paying the mortgage.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we did that. And trust me, we were no, 6-figure income jobs. We both had good jobs and we were working and paying the mortgage and trying to have some fun at the same time. You had 2 cars because you both had to commute to work.
You didn't have a choice there.
2 cars requires, 2 purchases of gasoline a week and double the insurance.
And in Aurora, it's not like you probably didn't have good public transit.
Really no public transit at the time. They had a GO train into downtown Toronto a couple times a day, but I wasn't going downtown. I was going from Aurora to Brampton, and she was going from Aurora to North York.
Okay.
So
cars,
public transit really wasn't an issue.
Take probably triple the time if you did.
What happened was we went to a friend's wedding, and I had the opportunity to sit at what I refer to as the single loser table. And the reason I say that, Bo, is, and you've done this, I'm sure, when your significant other is in the wedding party,
yes,
there's no place to put you.
I know.
They take all the singletons of the wedding party and they put them at the same table, right?
But you're the privileged partner of a special guest.
Well, yes, but you have no. I had no
but
other.
But they fill
ties.
the rest of the table with all the other singles,
right? With all and so I affectionately refer to it as the single loser table. They were incredibly. We had a great time.
Yes. Yeah.
And the guy was sitting next beside. It's like, so what do you do? He's a financial advisor. I'm like, cool. So what do you do?
Yeah. What does that mean?
And so he gave me his card and said, if you ever want to have a conversation, he said, give me a shout. I said, okay. So I did what anybody would do, and I slipped it into the breast pocket of my suit jacket.
Sure.
And off we went. We had a good time. So the next time I wore the suit, which was for a wedding, about a year later. Because I wasn't a suit guy at work. IT never had to do the suit thing, right?
A whole year went by.
We were kind of like, dockers in a shirt thing.
Yeah.
So I finally put on the suit after a year. I was like, wow, I remember this guy.
Yeah.
He was kind of funny, had an interesting conversation. And I showed it to my partner and said, we should give him a call. Okay. So we did that.
Just because? Was there any motivation? Like,
it was like,
we're thinking about our finances more.
Let's go see if we can learn something.
What can we do?
Are we doing everything we can do? Should we be doing something better? Are we way off course? My parents' grounding in money. My dad was an auto worker in Windsor. Mom stayed at home until I went to school and then worked at a variety of jobs, including doing the auto worker thing for a couple of years. But it was never for them about a long-term investing, planning for the future, investments and amassing money.
They just knew to put it away.
They knew to put it away and to save some and pay down the mortgage and make sure you don't borrow money unless you absolutely have to. And if you do, pay it off as fast as you can. Yeah. So they saved money. They bought cars, but they paid cash for their cars.
Yeah. All good advice.
All good advice. My partner's parents' upbringing at the time was a little more investment based and planning for the future.
Okay.
And so it's like, let's go see if we can learn something. So we went to Waterloo, which was where he was from, and etched on the glass door his company, and never said on his card, but he was president of the company.
Oh, okay.
And so we're sitting in the office, and I'm looking
funny.
around going like, a little bit intimidated here. And we had a great conversation. And he asked us lots of questions, spent no time talking about himself. It was all about, what would you like to accomplish? Where have you been? What have you seen? What have you done? What would you like to do? I said to him at the end, I said, I got to tell you, I don't think we're right for this. And he's why? And it's obvious you're really, really, to me, it was obvious just based on where we were. You must be doing pretty good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or else you wouldn't be running a company with, 14 advisors and office space and all of this. And I said, we really don't have a whole lot of money. And so, quite frankly, I was a bit intimidated.
Okay.
And he said, I'm happy to have you talk to one of our other team members, but don't be intimidated. He said, here's what I've learned along the way in my career doing what I do. If you're willing to get engaged, create a plan, and follow the plan, he said, I'll help you every step of the way.
Okay.
He said, I'm not worried about what you have today. He said, I'm worried about what you want to have 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. So on the drive home, it was like, okay, we should be doing this.
Okay.
We went out, talked to some other folks, do the thing, right? You've got to kind of interview a number of advisors.
Okay, so
is there a fit? Is there a feel?
Okay.
And we kept coming back to his comment about, I really don't care what you have today.
Mm-hmm. Did other advisors care what you had?
Some did.
Yeah.
And it was like, you could be doing much better things with your money and you should be reallocating this and doing this. But they never asked us the questions about where is it you would like to be 10 or 15 years from now?
They were just focused on having you.
They were kind
of
focused on, well, we can get a client and we can move the money out of the bank and we can do this. And if we get them to pay down the mortgage sooner, then they'll be freeing up cash flow and we can do all this other stuff.
Sure.
And we can sell them insurance and we can, all of, whereas his whole approach was, you've done more things than you think you've done. Mm-hmm. So even though despite the fact you think you're not successful, it wasn't we didn't think we were successful. We just didn't think mentally we belonged in that office.
Gotcha.
And he said, you've accomplished way more than many have where you are. And he said, but that said, he said, it's where do you want to go from here? And he said, I'll help you get there and we will build a plan. And he said, if you want to commit to the plan, he said, I'll commit to you. He said, if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed, he said, I've got young, junior advisors and other members of the team, and maybe they would resonate with you better. He said, I kind of, he said, I like both of you. And we liked him, so much so that, we got invited to his wedding.
Nice.
As it unfolded and the friendship and the things that evolved in the book, as it unfolded, were great. And, and then we got to a certain point with him. Life intervened on a number of things. So we did this and, a bunch of job changes, did a stint living overseas. Okay. Went to Switzerland for 6 years.
Switzerland for 6 years.
Living in a cool little town on the side of a mountain called Blonay.
Is this IT job for you?
Absolutely not. I was kind of the stay-at-home husband guy.
Oh, okay.
So it was a job transfer for my ex. Worked for Nestle, and their global offices are right on Lake Geneva. It was pretty cool.
What did you do?
And I had by that time, I had written the book.
Oh, okay. So let's step back then from you meeting a financial advisor. Now you're learning on your own?
Learning on my own, but also getting regular updates from him, correspondence. I met with him a lot because I was intrigued about the process of, how do people make decisions with money and how do they create a plan and how do they stay focused on a plan and what happens when life intervenes? Because, I tell audiences all the time, it's great to have a plan, but at the end of the day, life doesn't care about your plan.
That's right.
It has its own plan and it may not mesh with your plan. So what happens when life intervenes? And that's kind of what happened when in 2003, the opportunity came up to move overseas. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the book had just came out. I thought that I could spend 2 or 3 visits a year back to Canada, kind of do my thing, keep my fingers in the market. As it turned out, lived in Switzerland for 6 years and came back 74 times in 6 years.
Whoa.
Because what I found out was that my clients, if you're not here kind of present with them, they don't think you exist.
Oh, interesting.
And it was great. It was a great experience. Got to travel a little bit of Europe. Got to spend too much time on airplanes. When flight attendants are going, Robert, nice to see you again. It's like, you're spending too much time on airplanes.
So when did you leave IT?
I left IT probably in the 99, 2000 timeframe, right around the first .com bubble.
Okay.
And so I had migrated away from writing code to managing a team to working for a software company that our company was using their software, but I knew more about the company's software than the people who worked at it.
Okay.
And they came along one day and said, why don't you just come work for us? They said, when our tech support team is calling you, our client, to find out why doesn't this work, you should probably work for us.
Sure.
And I did. And one really great thing happened out of that, Bo, was they sent me to conferences and said, we want you to talk about our software.
Okay, so that's when you started.
And that's when I started the whole idea of presenting.
Yeah.
And I kind of said, no, I can't do this. I can't get up in front of
So that's where you were at that time.
Audiences of tech geeks.
Not comfortable.
And they said, you can do this. You're really good at this. You've got natural talking style. You know the software inside and out. And so I started doing it. And the more I started doing it, the cooler it got. Because I realized that instead of, like many presenters at the time and many presenters today, if you've ever gone to a financial industry conference, it's slide after slide after slide of data, numbers. And it's like, and you can always tell when the presenter says, this slide's really hard to read for those of you at the back. It's like, then change your slide.
There was a couple of those at the Payments Canada conference.
There you go.
I took a picture of a slide where I didn't understand anything that was up there because it was all ISO 20022, this and that. And,
exactly.
And it was a flow chart of, but you were trying to present the software in an accessible type way? Is that
in
right?
an accessible way with a story of, here's what you can do with it.
Yes.
Here are the really cool tech things buried in the background.
Of course.
We enable you to do SQL database search algorithm structure in such a way that nobody cares.
You could do that.
But if you could show them, you could create a system that could do this and paint these pictures for people. That was the best way of getting that across. And fortunately for me, that's kind of evolved into how I present today. So I'll go to present at a conference today, and the conference organizer, can you send us your slides? Sure. I send them the slides. And I always know, because the phone rings about 20 minutes later, there's no words in your presentation.
Yeah.
I know. It's all images. Well, what are you going to talk about? That's why you're hiring me.
Yeah, exactly.
I said, I'm going to make the assumption that my audience can read. I said, so there's no sense me putting lots of words on the slide, because what I want to do is create a picture and a memory for them that they take away going, that's what Robert was talking about.
Yeah.
Not a random quote or, here's the 7 bullet points to financial success.
Yeah. Like a speaker is for speaking. And you're right. If there's a lot of people are either reading or writing or listening, it's really hard to do all of those things at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And now I get it, because part of the background, and this is kind of the tenuous tie back to the degree in psych, understanding everybody learns differently. Some like pictures, some like listening to you, and others want data on a slide.
Okay.
And so I've kind of evolved that. And I'll give data out as a handout to reinforce the picture that's up there so that they listen to the story that I'm talking about.
So they'll have it in their hands to read, depending on where you are.
But they don't need to see it up there in the 7 bullet points. And I may have a slide in the handout that ties to the picture. I'm only showing the picture. The bullet points are in your handout, but you're going to listen to me talk. And I'm not going to talk about all 7. I may only talk about 2. But what I learned a long time ago about conference attendees, if they see 7 bullet points on the slide and you only talk about 2 and go to the next slide, they're like, you didn't talk about those last 2.
Oh boy.
And so that's why today I've really created my material to be almost entirely image driven.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you get from presenting about software to, well, first of all, to writing a book? How do you get into the personal finance business?
So back in 99, 2000, when everything blew up with the .com, I was working for a couple of companies based in California that we had software that was so cool we couldn't figure out how to sell it.
Okay.
We would show people, we would demo the software, and people would go like, this is so cool. Now what can I do with this?
Yeah, what
and it's like, you didn't get it. And of course, they blew up, and when they blew up, my little job with them blew up.
Okay.
My best story about that was that I actually got let go by email.
Oh, wow.
From the second company that blew up from Cupertino, California, which now you got to remember, this is 2001 time frame. We didn't have the technology we had today where we carry around email in our pocket, right?
Okay.
I was working at a client site. I didn't check my corporate email for 2 days. I was busy installing, updating. I worked for 2 days after I'd been let go.
Oh, no.
Because I didn't know I had been let go.
And what about a phone call? No?
A phone call would have been nice.
You would have had a cell phone, maybe.
I would have had a cell phone.
Without email on it.
But here's what happened. The first email went out, said, okay, the company's imploded. Here's what's happening. We're having a conference call Friday at 3:00 to discuss what's happening. Here's the access code for the conference call. So the email about, we're all out of work came on the Monday. The email about the conference call came on the Wednesday.
Okay.
Well, by that time, I'm back home.
Yep.
And I get in the corporate email, and it's like, conference call to discuss our severance packages. So I pick up the phone and call my boss.
Yeah.
And went, what's going on? And they went, you didn't get the email?
Oh,
it's like,
the
email.
email.
You remember I was at client site.
Like, don't you know where I was?
Well, and I had kind of an interesting role because I was a technical salesperson. So part of me reported to the tech team and software development. Part of me reported to sales.
Okay.
And when all of this happened, the head of sales talked to the head of IT development and said, you talk to Bob. And they said, you talk to Bob.
Great.
Nobody talked to Bob.
Nobody talked to Bob.
So we have the conference call and it's all good. Decided to take 4 months off. Had a little severance package. It wasn't great. I hadn't been there that long, but it's like, okay, I got to clear my head of all this IT techie stuff. And so took 4 months off, met with financial advisor, and first question he asked was, so how do you feel?
Yeah.
This was awesome.
Okay.
I said, why don't more people do this? And he
Take
said,
the 4 months.
he said, exactly. He said, because they don't believe they can.
Yeah.
And I said, don't believe they can. I said, why don't they believe they can? He said, because nobody's ever told them they could.
And financially, how are you doing it? Like, you were able to save and build
at this
some
point,
investments?
He said to me, he said, you've just taken 4 months off. You didn't worry about making your mortgage payment. You didn't worry about paying the car insurance. You did a little bit of traveling, nothing super extravagant. He said, but did you worry about it the whole time you were gone? I said, no. I said, to be honest, not once. He said, that's why we built the plan.
Nice.
And I said, so when people tell me, because I had heard this a bit during the forum, oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. And I mentioned it to him, and he said, I understand that. He said, when people are telling you you're so lucky, it's because you're doing things they want to do, but aren't doing. And so taking that into consideration, Bo, for the next 6 months, every time I heard that, you're so lucky, my question was always, what's your plan with your advisor to get lucky?
Yeah.
And invariably I heard, I don't use an advisor.
Yeah.
So how's that working for you?
How's it working for you?
And further conversations, what the advisor said to me, he said, you should write a book about this experience. I said, nobody wants to read a book about me. I said, because I'm nobody special and I don't know that much. He said, you know more than you think you do. And he said, you're a decent communicator. He said, create a short story for me that kind of encompasses what you learned last year.
Okay,
I can try that. I was a good technical writer. I was writing articles for ISO magazine and SQL database magazine on, algorithm search strategy theory. Nobody wanted to read that. But this was my first kind of foray at, I'll call it creative writing.
Yeah.
It took me about 6 months to get a short story together, and I sent it to him. Hadn't heard from him for about a week. And then I started getting emails from people I'd never heard, never even knew, never even met before going, when's the book going to be ready? And so I responded, there's no book. And B, who are you?
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I'm a friend of Mike's. Mike sent me the synopsis for the book you're working on." I'm like, "There is no book, and I'm going to kill Mike."
Yeah. He's already advertising it.
So long story short, he gathered these folks in a boardroom of his office, and at a whiteboard, we drew out the picture of I was very adamant about this, Bo, if there is ever to be a book, what would it look like? And 18 months later, it released Rich as a State of Mind.
Okay.
And from there, it was lots of learning. I didn't know how to write a book. I'd never written a book. It was a stretch to write a short story. So you learn about writing, and you learn about editing, and you look about book publication, and you learn that book companies aren't interested in your book on personal finance.
Yeah.
And so you accumulate rejection letters, and you decide to self-publish the book. Had a great coffee meeting with David Chilton. Why? Because he wrote arguably the most successful book in Canadian publishing history.
Yeah.
And he said, "I think you've got a good idea here." And he said, "Here's what I would do." He said, "Here's what I learned about doing it." Incredibly open and giving person. Self-published the book, and then found out there was only about 7 people really interested in my book. And so you've got to figure, how do you market the book? Well, you market the book by going to talk about the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I approached a couple of friends of mine at Investors Group and said, "I've got this book." And they said, "Come talk to our team. This would be cool."
Okay.
So I went and talked to the team. I have no idea how to create a presentation about a book and about this concept of personal finance, because I'm not a financial advisor. I've never worked in that industry. I've never taken courses. I've only ever been the client. And in terms of being the client, I knew what it was like to be a client, and how I felt when markets went all crazy, and how I felt when had a plan and then unexpected expenses come up that throw your plan off whack. How do I talk to advisors? And so I created a presentation that I called A Peek Inside Your Client's Mind. And open with, I've never been you. I don't want to be you. I'm never going to be you. But here's what you need to know about us that I bet you don't know.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
And at the end of the presentation, the regional director of this Office of Investors Group said, "That was an outstanding message. I'm encouraging all of you to pick up at least 10 of Robert's book. There's a sign-up list at the back of the room. You sign up for the book, tell me how many you want. Robert's going to give us the best price based on the quantity." And that day sold 195 copies of the book,
wow,
which was more than I had sold in the previous 3 months. And I went, this is kind of cool.
This is the way to do this. I
could do this every day. Well, I'd like to think I could do that every day. You find out later you can't. For a variety of reasons.
Sure.
And, the rest is, they say, was history. And to this point, the book is now in its 17th printing. It's in its 3rd iteration because I continue to update it. Why? Because stuff happens globally in the markets, and governments change, and taxes change. And, there was no TFSA back in 2004. TFSA came along. There's a U.S. edition of the book because while the story remains the same, and
you can't write TFSA in a U.S. book.
No, and you don't write 401k or IRA in a Canadian book.
Right.
It changes the technology, but at the heart of the book, Bo, what we've got, what I believe anyways, is a Canadian family, slightly dysfunctional, trying to figure out, what do I do with all this stuff? What do I do with saving for the future? And what about compound interest? Do I really need to set goals? I know I should have some insurance. How much insurance should I have? Is it that important? What type of insurance do I need? Do I pay down the mortgage? Do I put money in an RSP? Do I pay down the mortgage? Do I put money in a TFSA? Do I do all 3? Do I borrow money when I need to? How do you borrow money? How do you plan for the future? And oh crap, at some point, somebody in my life is going to pass away. What do I do then? Mm-hmm. What is it like to be an executor? What is it like to try to, manage the emotion around money? And that for me is one of the things I talk to audiences about all the time. Even though we're in 2018 now, money is still incredibly emotional for Canadians. And as I said to him, I don't get it. think about it. As I say to audiences, if you're a guy, you're sitting on it's in your wallet, in your back pocket. It used to be paper with ink. Now it's all high-tech Mylar and plasticky. And if you believe what you read on the internet, the hundreds smell like maple syrup, right? It's out there.
Right?
It's out there. Because it's on the internet, it's true.
Yes.
So I've never tried it.
I never have either.
I'm just going to assume that it's true because it's on the internet. So what is it about money? And for much of us, it boils down to, what did we learn as a kid? What did we see our parents do? What did our extended family do with money? What did we learn in school? Which for the most of us, nothing. So where did we get that first grounding, which led back to your first question? Mm-hmm. What's your first money experience? My first paycheck, holding like $70 in my hand, thinking I was the richest guy in LaSalle, Ontario.
That's right.
And we know people with multiple commas in their net worth who are not happy.
No.
And in some cases, they're scared because they think it could all go away tomorrow. Yet we've met people, and I've got some good friends who fall into this category. If they've got $60 in their pocket, man, they're the happiest people you've ever met without a care in the world about tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And the question then becomes, which of those people is in a better place?
Yeah.
And to me, I think it's obvious. To the listener, it may not be obvious to them, or they may have an entirely different opinion. And that's what makes the whole concept of money and personal finance in the work that you do so interesting. So
a lot of this seems to be because of the plan that you put together with your financial advisor. Can we drill down on that for a little bit? We can. And unlike today, and I've still got a copy of this plan, and I'll pull it out when I'm speaking at financial industry events. I've been incredibly fortunate with my career, if I want to call it that I've gotten to speak to big financial companies across North America. I've spoken at industry conferences and had the opportunity to walk out in front of an audience of 2,500 people, from this guy who needed to go and present at an IT conference back in 1993 and went, I can't go speak to these 25 tech geeks. Yeah. And now I'm walking out on stage and the music's going, and, please welcome Robert Gignac. And, it's like looking out at the audience going, this is going to be fun. That's pretty awesome. And I pull out that original plan. It was 4 pages. So it was all possible because of this plan. And now what I'm wondering throughout all of this is, in 2001, first of all, would you reveal how old you were at that time? I would have been, in 2001, 40 years old. Okay, so you're 40 years old. Yeah. And... Sorry, I was having to do math in my head. Absolutely. And I'm not a numbers guy. Totally fine. And so at 40, if someone was laid off from their job, whether they had a plan or not, it might not feel like they can sort of take 4 months and then longer. So your plan was telling you that you would be okay? The plan was telling me I would be okay. And I'll admit, I had a little bit of a severance from being let go. Yeah, so you had that to live from the company. Yeah. That, for that 4 months, it really was like I had 4 months worth of income, but I knew that in month 5, you better get back to work. Yeah, but you didn't. I mean, you didn't technically. I didn't technically, but I was doing some part-time work for some people that I knew who knew me well enough, who said, yeah, we've got some things you can do to fill in the gaps. Because that's all you needed to do was fill in the gaps. If you're really pursuing this book thing. Yeah. I wasn't necessarily convinced about the book thing, that it would turn out to be something really, really cool that now has been really the last 16 years of my life. But at the time I knew that, buckle down, cut out all the extraneous expenses. Okay. I got to admit, and this is something that I know to this day, part of our great success at whatever it is we do, in many cases, belongs to the person that you're partnered with. And I had some incredible support at that time. And then that support flipped when she had the opportunity to go and work in Europe, and I went along. You were supportive then, yeah. Said, and it goes both ways. And then you encounter another life change in 2010 when she decided to pursue
a more global opportunity, and we decided to go our separate ways. So, come back to Canada, live in a friend's basement going, what just happened? And try to figure out where life goes.
Yeah.
And got thrown off track.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Why? Because I got back on track and, got back into the rhythm and the routine. I'm thrilled about the fact that, we had postponed our discussion a little bit because it was in Europe celebrating a 5th anniversary trip for the last couple of weeks. And it was awesome.
Amazing.
And to this day, sometimes I struggle with the work thing. My mom passed away last year, and I'm an only child. So when I say it fell on me, my mom and dad didn't say, we expect you to, walk away from your job and do this while I'm sick. They never said that. But for me, it was, when I say obligation, it sounds negative. It's not. It's what I chose to do. I wouldn't change it for a minute. And to give something back to people who gave me everything.
But you built yourself a life where you have the freedom to negotiate your own schedule.
Well, and also to be partnered with somebody who said, your mom and dad are way more important than 3 more speaking gigs.
Yeah.
Go hang out with them, and I'll be there every step of the way. But because she's a school teacher, she has a much more rigid schedule than I do. So there were weeks when I was there Monday to Friday. She came down Friday night. I came home for a weekend break, went back Sunday night. She went back to work Monday. And I'll never be able to repay her for that. But she loved my mom and dad. And so, last year I took a huge swath of time off work. And did it affect finances? Sure it did. But it was always from Nadine, who said to me, your mom and dad are more important than this. We'll never be worried about where lunch money is coming from. Go and do this. We're okay.
Because what does the financial impact actually mean to you in terms of, like, say, you lost some income? Does that mean that if you wanted to stop working in the future, you couldn't as soon as you want?
Maybe.
Or does it just mean you have less freedom to do less work?
No, I wouldn't say less freedom, Bo. There were some things that we kind of had on the horizon that have been pushed out a couple of years.
Okay, so things like that.
And so, the reality is, so what? It got pushed out a couple of years. I wouldn't trade those last 6 months with my mom for anything. And really, there was that 6 months where it was all about mom, and then there was 4 to 6 months where it was all about dad afterwards.
Okay.
He didn't know. They got married very young.
Of course, yeah.
My mom was 19. My dad was 20. They had me 10 months after they got married, so you can kind of do the math there. At the point where I was born, mom hadn't turned 20 yet, and dad had just turned 21.
Yeah, it's their whole life.
And, they were married 57 years. He didn't know life without my mom. And I don't think he would say I'm giving anything away by saying he was a little lost for a while.
I'm sure it's a common thing.
And it also came at a tough time of year. Mom passed away late November. So where are you? December, Jan, Feb.
Holidays.
There's holidays, but it's winter.
Yeah.
And Dad's an outdoor guy.
Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah.
Gardening, cutting lawns, fishing, hanging out with his buddies at they all kind of fish together in their boats all at the marina together.
So he's inside.
And all his buddies hibernate for the winter.
Sure.
So, and that made it tougher. And sure enough, when March and April came along and spring rolled along, he got his rhythm back and he's doing great. And I'll see him later on tonight, pretty much, 5 hours after we're done here. And he's doing great. And there are times, and I share this story with audiences, he put his arm around me and said, we couldn't have done this without you. Mm-hmm. I'm not a super emotional guy, but the day he said that, it was like, I gotta go.
Hard not to have emotion then.
And because of that, it made all of that worthwhile. But what it was, Bo, is also it's a learning experience massively. I had no idea what it was like to be an executor. I had no idea what it was like to work with a funeral home and all the stuff that has to be done. canceling passports, canceling SIN numbers, canceling CPP payments, and dealing with a funeral home and dealing with a cemetery and dealing with insurance companies and all of the things that come with that transaction of somebody passing away. And to be honest, I have started working on book number 2. I should have started working on book number 2 10 years ago, but don't get me started on that. Much of this new piece, I think, is going to center about life 2.0.
Yeah.
What happens afterwards? Because I've learned so much about it. And even through Mom's illness, navigating the Canadian healthcare system and personal support workers and what insurance companies will pay for and not pay for, and how do you acquire a hospital bed for a house, and where do you go to, and what about nursing homes, and what about palliative care? There is so many opportunities to do things and learn things, and I think people get overwhelmed with it all sometimes because there's no central repository of information. There's no go to this website and start working through. Here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C, here's plan D.
I guess I would just Google it.
And you can.
And you may or may not find, yeah.
And here's what I found through the process. There's a wealth of information out there, but nobody's information ties to anybody else's information.
Okay, yeah.
And so what they've given you is about 100 pieces of fabric, and now you need somebody who can turn it into a quilt.
You got to weave it together.
Exactly.
That sounds like a very useful book for people who, because I'm sure it falls just on a lot of kids, being the executor, taking care of their elderly parents.
And it does. And what I found out through that process, and maybe you've experienced this yourself, is people need an advocate. And I was able to be Mom's advocate and able to be Dad's advocate.
Good.
But there are lots of families and lots of older people whose kids might live in BC or California or, somewhere else around the globe where they're trying to advocate for themselves. And that can be a very difficult and daunting task. The more you know, the better questions you ask. The better questions you ask, the better decisions you get to make. And when you're advocating for a parent or a loved one or a spouse or a sick child, and we hear this all the time about a parent who was adamant that their child was truly sick, and the medical profession somehow missed it because of something, but the parent said, no, it's this, and then they find out it's that. But had the parent not advocated and said, I'm not going until I get an answer, then stuff doesn't happen. And that's what I learned about that process, through Mom's illness and through trying to be Dad's advocate after.
And what I'm thinking about is something you mentioned earlier about either the person who maybe isn't making enough so they can't take time off work, or they feel like they can't, or the person who's making $1 million and feels the same way for some reason. They have this thought in their head that I can't take the time off to go and help or be with Mom or help Dad because I'm not going to recover from this. Yeah. And what would you, just to finish up on a note about that and maybe talking about the
thought process for me, Bo, is that it's absolutely worth it. It's not about the money. What you may lose in income through the process will never make you any happier because you've had it, because you've lost time. Yeah. You see the platitudes there, time is money. No, time isn't money. Time with somebody is time you're never going to get back, especially when you know that this wasn't having the flu, this wasn't a broken leg. Yeah. We knew where this was going. It was only a matter of time before it happened. And Mom was on a cancer drug called Afinitor. Okay. $7,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
For this drug for 30 days.
Unbelievable.
And the Ontario Drug Benefit paid for a chunk of it.
Okay.
And Dad's coverage through his retirement benefits paid for most of the rest of it. But I share with people all the time, if you didn't have that coverage and you had to come up with $4,000 a month or $5,000 or even $2,500, what would you do? Yeah. Would you remortgage the house? Would you raid the kids' RESP? Would you drain your RRSP? not because it fixed the problem, but because you were buying time for somebody you loved. And we're very fortunate in that aspect to have that kind of coverage. But if it hadn't have been there, would I have spent my own money to do that? It wouldn't have even been a question. In a heartbeat, that would have happened. Take the time, build the relationship, and spend the time with those that you love, because the money is really secondary at the end of the day. Now, there are plans and opportunities through both provincial and federal governments for you to be able to take money out of an RSP or TFSA because of a family hardship emergency case where you're the caregiver. There's tax benefits. There's lots of things you could apply for. But again, all this information is scattered all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
And you've got to know to go and look for that up front. And even a simple thing, when it was very close to Mom's time and my wife was a school teacher, went to her union rep and said, I need to take some time off to go and do this. And the union they were like, yeah, absolutely. This is not an issue. You know, she's been teaching 35 years, highly regarded in her school. Oh, wow. And I mentioned this to the doctor who was caring for Mom, is the home palliative doctor, that she was going to take an unpaid leave. And she went, why would she do that? And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, all I've got to do is sign a form T2832 whatever, and her leave will be covered. She's teacher in Ontario, right?
Interesting.
It will be covered under her benefit plan for up to 6 weeks. And it was like, and I never made that comment or made the link. And it's not that the union rep didn't know or was hiding it. You know,
it's how many things do we not know?
It's how many things do we not know?
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to encourage people to do through my presentations and through the book, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more information you get, the better information you get, the better decisions you get to make. And that's really, in a nutshell, for me, what it's all about. Is it relates to what I went through with Mom and Dad, is what people go through in the personal finance realm as they're trying to plan for their family and their future. Don't stop asking questions.
And we'll keep trying to be advocates.
Exactly.
Right? As much as possible.
And never be afraid to ask the question.
That's right. Because
you never know who that person is who knows the answer, but you might have never thought the answer belonged to that person. You ask the question of somebody else who's been through this with your parents. Here's what I learned when I was doing this for my aunt or my grandparent. It's like, did you know that this was available? I had no idea that was available. Where do I find out more information about that? And it's continually ask, and be advocates, not only for your parents, but we have to do it for ourselves as well, right? When it becomes to our personal finances and creating a better, more successful financial future. It won't just happen if we're not engaged with the process.
And on that note, how do people find out more about you?
Find out more about me? Well,
if they want.
If they want to, they can go to robertgignac.com, which is kind of the me about me as a speaker,
sure.
And the Money and Motivation and More podcast and the We Talk Money TV show. About the book itself, it's richisastateofmind.com. So it's the book's title just spelled out, richisastateofmind.com. They can read sample chapters, they can read reviews, they can read articles I write for industry magazines. I'm sure I'm going to be posting our chat up there under the media side later on if you're willing to let me
Perfect.
do so.
Sounds good.
About conversations I like to have with people about money, because I'm kind of passionate about it. And at the end of the day, I want Canadians to have a more successful financial future, whatever that is for them, because it is a personal thing for money. Some want multiple commas in the net worth. Some want to sit by a lake in a tent and enjoy sunsets.
Exactly.
And
have the $60 in their pocket.
Both of those are very cool things. And if it makes you happy at the end of the day, I'd like to help make that happen for them.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming to my studio in Hamilton. I know you're not very far from here, but appreciate you making the trip.
It's been an honor to be able to share this time with you and share some ideas. And keep doing what you're doing, because I think it really, really does help people create a better future.
And same to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or however you get your podcasts. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. I'd love to get your feedback on this episode in my new Facebook group. To find the group, go to Facebook and search for The Personal Finance Show. Once you're approved, you'll be able to interact with me and previous guests of the show and other fans as well. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Personal Finance Show. Next week, my guest will be financial empowerment coach Danielle Alexandria.